All right. We are here on Military Images Live. This is Ron Coddington, the editor of Military Images, America's only magazine that's solely dedicated to Civil War portrait photography of soldiers and sailors. We're going to have a 2-minute countdown here so we can get a critical mass of folks on tonight. Hello, John Banks. It's great to meet you in person this weekend. Michael, good to see you. David, how are you doing, sir? Rick, how are you? Fred is here. Hello, David again. Jeff, how are you doing? Gilbert, hello. Have a good crowd showing up. The clock is already moving. Hey, just 1 minute to go. So little programming note, we usually have our episodes on Monday. However, with the show this weekend that I'll be talking about shortly, I was a little delayed in getting home, so we had to postpone the episode by a day. So an unusual special episode for Tuesday. And thank you all for tuning in. I really do appreciate that. We are about to get started here. We've got less than a minute to go. So thank you all for hanging around for the Tuesday night edition of Military Images Live. For those of you who are in Franklin this weekend, it was great to meet all of you. And we're going to be taking a look at some images this evening. And here we are. Let's get started. Voila. For the, as I was mentioning, I had a delay yesterday, didn't get back in time to do a show. So we're going to go on the air tonight and talking about the 2018 Middle Tennessee Civil War show. For those of you who live in the Nashville, Franklin area and were able to make it, it was great to see so many of you. We had a pretty much a packed house. The rainy weather was probably a contributing factor, but it's one of the great shows in the country. I would strongly encourage you, if you live in the area, or maybe not exactly close by and you're just looking for a trip, to go listen to some music in Nashville or visit the Battle of Franklin. The Lotes House, the Carter House, Carnton Plantation, they're all in this area. And of course, the show is held around the anniversary of the battle that was fought there in 1864. So if you get a chance to go to the show, I highly recommend it. I want to say a big thanks again to everyone who attended. And one of the big takeaways I had this weekend, and it's something I talk about from time to time, and that's the importance of community. The community of, specifically, the community of Civil War photo collectors. We're a diverse group. We come from all different kinds of backgrounds, all different places in life, and we all share one thing in common, and that is the passion for collecting Civil War photography and having a desire to preserve this Civil War photography for future generations. I can't tell you several occasions how many times this weekend I heard folks refer to themselves as caretakers of photographs. And I think that is absolutely true. That's the way that I feel about collecting photography. And so many folks that I've met along the way, particularly this weekend, have talked about their passion for photographs. So this episode in some way really is a salute to you. I've often talked about, if you have read the editor's note that I include with every issue, I talk about the community and I talk about all of you as being the lifeblood of that community. And it really is true. Those of you who've come forth with your photographs, the research that you've done, and an interest in sharing all that makes a huge difference, because it enables us to get the word out and speak to a large audience about the importance of these images, not only for the aesthetic reasons, not only for their uniforms, their weapons, but also to help educate and inspire future generations of Americans. So we had a lot of great images come to the show this weekend. I counted overall more than 50 scans that I made of various photographs, and I thought that I would take a little bit of time this evening just to show you some of the images that came out along the way. Here's the first one. Okay, if you look close, I'll slide this a little bit closer here. This is a carte de visite, and you'll see that it's hand canceled on the back with a simple pencil inscription that says "Captured Morgan's Raiders." Chances are that these two guys were captured during the Ohio raid in 1863, and they wound up in Chicago at the prisoner of war camp there. And the photograph may have been taken by D.F. Brandon, who was a photographer who was over at Camp Douglas, who made many of those photographs. It's very possible that his photographer's back mark is actually covered by this stamp, or it was an image that was made later in the war or after the war of these two guys after they returned. I want to point out something quite interesting. The clothing that they're wearing, I'm not sure if you can see it, but let me hold it up close. You'll see that their clothing is actually a patchwork of different kinds of material. I've never quite seen anything like that, but quite an unusual and interesting image. And this comes from Rick Brown, who was at the show. And I want to repeat, for those of you who are just joining us, all of the images that you'll see here tonight, except for the last one, came from the show this weekend. And I should also say that all of these images have not really been researched. I pretty much downloaded them today, made printouts of a few of them just to give you a flavor of what was at the show. From here, we're going to process all these images, which means we're going to get them ready in Photoshop. We're going to do some research about the lives of these soldiers and try to find out more about them. And then the selected images will go into future issues of the magazine. This is one that may make it. He's identified only as Captain Walsh, and he was taken by the Whitehurst Gallery in Washington, D.C. And what caught my attention about him is the medals that he's wearing. If you can see, I really don't know quite what they are. We'll have to do some research there. But the medal that he's wearing on your right, but on the left side of his chest, appears to be a British medal. Could be from the Crimean War, which would suggest to me that he was an immigrant that came from England in the late 1850s, maybe around 1860, 1861. This one's from the Rick Carlisle collection. Pretty amazing image here. This Union cavalryman comes from the Dennis Headley collection. And one thing that really caught my attention, aside from the way he's brandishing that saber and wearing his dress hat, is notice his left hand. He's actually holding the holder for his saber, and he's pulled it out. Pretty great photo. Now, this image reminds me to tell you that some folks will make appointments before I go to the show to tell me that they have images that they're bringing. I scanned a whole group of them from Anthony Hodges, who you may know if you're subscribing. You may know that he has written an article about Lookout Mountain. We have a second installment and a three installment series coming up in our winter issue. And then we have a final installment that will come out in the spring. The final installment will be about the post-war years. And this is an image of 3 veteran Signal Corpsmen at Lookout Mountain. Wonderful photograph. Here's another one. I can't show you them all, but there's a lot of them from Anthony's collection, and you'll see them in the spring issue. Here is a group of Confederate veterans sitting on top of the famous Umbrella Rock at Lookout Mountain. Here's one from collector Jeff Lunken. And Jeff is a new subscriber. If you're out there tonight, Jeff, hey, how are you? This one is certainly worthy of some research. The image is of what appears to be an artilleryman. He's wearing a light colored jacket, perhaps a medium to maybe slightly dark gray. He has a high collar with buttons on it. The collar is very dark, might be in a red or perhaps a very, very dark gray. Not sure about that entirely, but certainly the uniform is suggestive of artillery, perhaps militia. What's inside the case is the last name is very difficult to read. It looks like Captain Bracey or Bracy or Dracy, possibly Tracy, and it says Cobb's Battery CSA. And this makes me think of Cobb's Legion in Georgia. Cobb's Battery, the troop artillery, could very well be connected to that organization. So more work to be done here. In some preliminary searching we did at the show, we weren't able to find a Captain Dracy or any captain in the battery that ended with a CY, but he could have been someone who enlisted, came up through the ranks, and then became a commissioned officer. So more work to be done here, but a really interesting photograph. I should also say, we're making some assumptions here. The case appears to be original to the image, the way it fits in there. So it seems like that image and the case actually belong together. The inscription inside the case is slightly faded, which is suggests, of course, that it's period. I don't think it's something that's been added later. And I'm also intrigued by CSA, which you can barely make out here. I'll hold it a little closer for you. CSA is treated differently than the other text, which is handwritten. The CSA letters are bolder and they're drawn with an outline, and there appears to be a little cross-hatching in the letters, which maybe suggests stripes like a flag or something like that. So that seems similar to me to some of the fantastic topography that all of you have seen in books and on broadsides from that time period. So my feeling is that this is certainly genuine. The inscription is genuine as period, and the image seems to fit in the case. Doesn't seem to be jammed in there, and the wearing around the mat on the photograph all seems to be genuine. So we're gonna do some work and try to figure this out. More to come. So wonderful image from Phil McCoy's collection, believed to be a Texan. He's got some interesting dark collar with some very light colored cuffs that have a fancy V shape towards the center of them. He's wearing a light colored collar and holding what appears to be a Bowie knife. Really interesting photograph. Have a lot more work to try to track him down on that one. So we'll be doing some work there. Another one from Phil's collection is James Crozer of the 6th Kentucky Cavalry. This is another one of those ones, there's no question that he was a prisoner of war because of the back mark here. It's from, as I mentioned earlier, the D.F. Brandon studio in Camp Douglas. Brandon was pretty much the photographer, and a number of images are out there of Confederates that were in the prisoner of war camp. The conditions there, as many of you know, were really bad, right up there with Andersonville and other prisons. So more work to be done here. On the back, it says Mrs. Margaret W. Crozer, Danville County, Kentucky, or pardon me, Danville and Boyle County, Kentucky. So my thought here is that this image was probably sent to his mother or perhaps a sister, someone to let them know that he was still alive. So he's sitting here in his chair. He's looking pretty good considering his status as a prisoner of war. And as I mentioned, more work here to be done to find out his birth date, his death date, what happened to him, did he actually survive his imprisonment? Things that we don't know yet, but things that we're going to try to find out. I should also mention the name David Keller. David is a real champion of Camp Douglas in Chicago and has been working diligently to bring recognition to that historic spot. And what he's doing now is putting together research papers and studies that look at the camp and look at the lifestyle inside the camp. And I'm glorifying it by calling a lifestyle. And I actually have those reports. Dave has done a tremendous job in researching conditions, researching the camp itself. And I'm quite confident that you're going to see a piece in Military Images sometime in the next year or so that's based on David's work, and will most certainly include this image of James Crozer and others who were imprisoned at the camp. Carl Sundstrom was there, and Carl shared this image of a bandsman, a Union soldier, it appears. And this gentleman, unidentified, is holding a pair of cymbals. And those cymbals, as you can see, he's got them sitting out as if he's about to bring them together. Really an interesting photograph. I don't typically see bandsmen with cymbals, so this definitely stands alone as an unusual example. And it also reminds me, we will have an issue that has a gallery of musicians in it in 2020 at the show, talking with Rick Carlisle, who some of you may know is a senior editor of Military Images, and he's one of the early pioneer collectors, and has an amazing collection. He's amassed over probably about 50 years or so. And I'm currently working with him to get some examples of his musicians, and I'm going to combine that with submissions that have come from all of you over the last 4 years, and we're going to put together what I hope is going to be a terrific gallery. The focus of that gallery, beyond music at this point, I don't really know, but we'll have something to share on that sometime in the near future. Carl also shared this image. This is a New Hampshire soldier, and his name is Clark Stevens. He was in the 2nd New Hampshire Volunteers, and Carl was, I can actually see that he was pretty moved when he was telling me this story. He was so surprised at Clark Stevens's his military service. In 1861, Stevens and the 2nd New Hampshire were caught up at 1st Manassas, where he suffered a wound and fell into Confederate hands. He wound up being in Richmond, where he served some months as a prisoner of war. In 1862, he was wounded at 2nd Manassas, so the Manassas battlefield proved not a good place for him. Suffered 2 wounds there. And then at Gettysburg in the Peach Orchard, a year later, in July of 1863, he suffered his 3rd wound of the war. The combination of all those wounds pretty much debilitated him to the point where he was no longer able to handle the rigors of camp and campaign. So he moved to a safer spot as an officer in the 2nd New Hampshire Heavy Artillery, and finished out his military service with that regiment. So we have more work to do on him. I should also mention we have a New Hampshire gallery that will be coming up in 2020, and Clark Stevens will either be part of that or he will be part of our Gettysburg gallery. That's become something of an annual tradition that we've had in our summer issue. This one I like, from the Scott Vizu collection, and it's really quite, it's sort of a classic shot of a young man. I don't think he's more than 13 years old, and you can tell by his muddy boots, by his rolled up trousers with some dirt on the bottom, the 4-button sack coat that's open, something of a civilian slouch hat with something, I'm not sure if it's company letter and a regimental number. There's something, some hat brasses going on up there, but he's just a kid. And Scott and I at the show were speculating, not sure if he was a soldier or if he was someone who had some kind of teamster or someone that had followed soldiers in camp. Have no idea. But we were thinking that he might very well be a soldier based on his ruffian look. And for those of you who may not know, there's something in the Union Army, something of a number of 10,000 or more kids between the age of 13 and 18 that served. And the U.S. or folks who are doing statistics from the U.S. government after the war, they made a decision to count, for statistical purposes, to count soldiers between the ages of 18 and 45. So if you were a soldier younger than 18 or older than 45, you were not counted in the official statistics that were compiled by various organizations. Now, you may think that's unfair. They certainly still counted as far as getting pensions were concerned, but for a bunch of reasons, they were not counted statistically. So this young man certainly may have been of that small number of boy soldiers. Here's a great image from Tim Warren's collection. A couple of pards. Feeling here is that they are likely Confederates. They got some casual slouch hats on. They have some tightly buttoned, single-breasted jackets on. Hard to see the one belt buckle that's visible. Really nice red tinted blouses. It's a great image. I know this video broadcast is not quite giving it the justice that it deserves, but a really nice image. You can tell these guys were comrades, maybe brothers, maybe in the same company. Don't know their story. They're not identified, but they clearly wanted to have this image made to preserve their time in what we think was the Confederate Army. Mike Werner, he may be with us this evening. He's a regular that tunes into this this video broadcast. A couple of Union guys here. Got some revolvers stuck into their waist belts. What really caught my attention, their sabers at their side. What really caught my attention is the soldier on the right side. He is the taller guy. He's looking down and glancing at his friend. Not quite sure what the meaning of that is, but it has kind of an interesting look. We've seen images of men looking off to the side, men looking in different directions, but it's not quite as often that you see one guy staring at the other like that. So not quite sure what the insinuation was, but it makes for a compelling photograph as you contemplate what was going on there. Another image from Mike's collection is this outdoor image. It's particularly clear. If you were to look at this close up, you would see that all three of these gentlemen were very much in focus when the photograph was made. And as you know, from image to image, especially group images, not everybody held still at the same time. So you'll always see a few guys who are out of focus, that drifted off for a moment, maybe had a little shakiness and weren't captured by the camera. All three of these guys certainly were. Wonderful image. Here's one, another one. This one's from the David Yunt collection. Caught my attention. Scanned a bunch of stuff from David, so thanks so much. And we had a great conversation as well in Franklin. David, one of the images, I'm only going to be able to show a couple tonight. This image is believed to be the first Delaware Cavalry. When was the last time you've seen cavalrymen from Delaware? But here's one, and has got a great hat on and standing there proudly with his saber in front of him. One more image to share with you tonight from the Franklin Show, also from David's collection. This is one that he posted on Facebook before the show, and I asked him if he'd bring it with him because I like to do a scan of it. Something really interesting about his very casual pose, the way the bugle is at his side with a very thin, almost looks like a cloth strap that's hanging around his shoulder. There's a little bit of description that comes with this 9th plate Ruby Ambro David provided this information. He has a 49 Colt pocket revolver, mentions shoulder tabs with long gold striping that signifies his musician's rank. The infantry hunting horn on his hat has a number 114 on it, which could be 114th Illinois or the 114th New York. That's possible. Looking for some help from all of you on that. Also, he wears a red feather in his cap. So, and there's a pillow on the case that has a lyre, a harp on it. And so that's from him. Really, really great image. It will most likely have a place in our musicians gallery. So that's just some highlights from the Franklin show. As I mentioned, there's a bunch more scans, and you'll be seeing them over the course of the next year. And I would invite you to join us at future shows to be able to share your images for inclusion in the magazine. So I want to end the show tonight by revealing the cover of the next issue of Military Images. Here's the back, which is our good friends at Cowan's Auctions. They have been with us for a long time, and they're great supporters of ours, and we think the world of them, and are delighted to help get the word out about the great images that they have up for auction. So the image I want to show you tonight is the cover, and the issue just came to me today, and it's going to be mailed on Thursday. So hopefully you all will begin getting them very soon. So here's the image. I need a drum roll, please. Here it is. This is the winter 2019 issue. And these two pards are posing in front of the Stars and Stripes. The one gentleman has a dark slouch hat on. The other one has a straw hat. They both are wearing their shirts. They have suspenders. You'll see cartridge box. You'll see a waist belt. This image belongs to Buck Zidell. Buck's collection is one of the featured galleries this time around. And the name of his gallery is called Where Light Meets Lens. So it's just one of the stories. So I'd urge you to look forward to that. If you're a subscriber, great. You should have this, I hope, in the next couple of weeks. With the holiday mailings, times can be variable, but I hope you'll have yours soon. For those of you who get our digital edition, you'll get that this weekend. And if you would like to subscribe, we will certainly honor our Black Friday deal, which is 2 years for the price of one. I'll put this ad out there in a little bit so that all of you, when I say ad, I mean I'm going to put the link so you can take advantage of the Black Friday deal. So, so that's about it tonight. I want to say a big thank you to all of you for hanging out with me. And for those of you, again, who made it to the Franklin Show, great to see you. If you haven't, come and join us next year, or come join us soon. We're going to be in Dalton, Georgia in February. We're going to be in Washington, D.C. in March, and then in various places after that. So thanks so much for tuning in. Wishing you all a great evening and a great rest of the week. Thank you. Bye.